guys. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, welcome. And for those of you who are repeat offenders, welcome back to the Conscious Basket Show. My name is Samantha McCord, and I am the founder and CEO of Conscious Basket. And on the show, we are going to be interviewing extraordinary people just trying to make a difference in this world and giving you tips on how you can too. So as always, if you like what we do, please subscribe, download a couple episodes, and leave a comment below. I will read them all. But for now, let's just dive right in.
They dealt with three components like synthetics, naturals, and animal products. And I realized I don't want to be anywhere near the synthetics. Like this, it almost repulsed you, just like there was something instinctual about it to me that I felt like, no, that's not going to be what I want to be about. And the animal products, of course, naturally, like, no, like this is a new era. We don't need to be using animal products in our perfumes.
In this episode, we welcome Laurie, the founder and CEO of Wild Coast Perfumery, who has been a serial entrepreneur her entire life, but for 30 years, she has always had the dream of becoming a perfumer. Only using pure plant-based precious essential oils, she is truly an artist who can tell stories with her signature scents. We cover following your heart to pursue your passion, why transparency in her ingredients is so important, what makes a perfume natural and how to avoid greenwashing, reducing her impact based on where she sources her ingredients, and how every one of her perfumes creates a memory in a bottle. Let's dive right in. Hey guys, welcome back to the Conscious Basket podcast. My name is Samantha McCord, the founder and CEO of Conscious Basket. Today we have the pleasure of welcoming Laurie. She is from Wild Coast Perfumery. She's actually the creator and founder. And after 30 years of dreaming about becoming a perfumer, she finally decided to follow her heart and create experiences with her beautiful concoction. So welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Samantha. I'm really happy to be here. Yeah.
So happy to have you. So
thank you.
Give the listeners a little bit of a rundown. Like, tell us a little bit about Wild Coast Perfumery.
Well, let's see. Well, okay, we're plant-based for one thing. So that's, we're very, very strict about that. Absolutely no synthetics, nothing that's produced in a lab. So not even something that would be considered a safe synthetic. And we don't use isolates either, where some natural perfumers use plant or scent molecules that are isolated. We don't use that. Strictly essential oils, absolutes, and tinctures. Okay, cool. And based on our many conversations, I know this isn't your first rodeo. You've done many, many things in the past. So a few.
Tell me a little bit about what you did before this.
Well, I've been an entrepreneur for a big chunk of my life, had different types of businesses, but I think the experiences all add to who you are, and you sort of carry little pieces through. It might be, it could be some knowledge that you get that you might bring forward and use, say, in packaging or something like that. But anyways, I've been an antique dealer, had like an antique mall at one time. I had a boutique fly fishing lodge. For instance, when I had that, I had like an extensive herb garden that I used in cooking and for aesthetics. But I was always thinking about the perfume business, but that herb, like all the herbs and the lavender and things that I used there, I was bringing things, now to the future from then, but little things were adding to what I'm doing now. Let's see, what else? Oh my goodness, I've done different. I worked for a Canadian airline. I was a trainer for many years. Don't ask me how I ended up there, but they actually hired me because of my entrepreneurial background. And we were a really good fit. And that was fun. Yeah, that was great fun. So that really, that added to some of my skill set too.
Yeah, you have so many things in your past that have built you up to, creating this company that you have today. And you had mentioned that you moved back to your hometown. You're like, okay, maybe I'm going to retire, but you don't believe in retirement anymore.
Well, no, but it keeps you young, right? That's what we say. Let's see. I had been living back east when I was working for the airline, and my goal was always to come back to British Columbia, and where I I grew up. I'm not originally from here, but I grew up here and spent a big chunk of my adult life and my childhood here. So, anyways, convinced my husband that we were going to move back. And yeah, so got here, was thinking, oh, probably like semi-retirement, I'll do something. I'm not sure what, but I'm still thinking of this idea. I'm developing this business plan in my head, not really so much on paper, besides like a little notebook that I kept ideas in. Mm-hmm. And when I got here, I just, something spark went off. I saw a location that would have been perfect. And I thought, I just feel impelled to do this now. So, and I had to put things in action. Mm-hmm.
So how long have you actually been thinking about this idea?
Well, it's embarrassing, but honestly, 30 years. And it all started from a trip when I was young and went to Italy, and I was on Capri and went to Carthusia Perfumery, which is a very old perfume house. And it was off season and there was absolutely no one around. And it was so charming. And, you're young and everything's beautiful in Italy, but there's bougainvillea trailing around the door. And there's this beautiful stone front, and they were so warm and welcoming and lovely. And it was like, how can I possibly do this? Like, because this would be a charmed life if I could somehow make this work. So that was when I first started thinking about it. And then it went from there with just a little bit of research on the side while I was doing other things, just trying to think about it and how to develop how I could bring that plan into action one day.
Yeah. And, it's one of those things too. I mean, life happens. You ended up becoming a mother. You had multiple businesses. Even though you did take some courses in the 90s for, perfume creation, it's just so hard to jump into creating that business at the time. There's just so much.
Yeah, it was. I mean, that's true. I mean, life happens, and I had a family, and it was my priority. So in the 80s, you basically had to speak French. You have a chemistry degree to go to perfumery school. So it was out for me in the 80s. And then I took some herbology classes, a little small aromatherapy courses, but it wasn't until the mid 90s. There was a course, and it was actually correspondence, but it was the best I could do at the time because I was still trying to add to my toolbox, thinking one day I'm going to do this. Yeah. And it was a course from Thailand, and they would send you all the materials to work with and to CD-ROM. And so you would go in a workbook but getting into it, they dealt with 3 components like synthetics, naturals, and animal products. And I realized I don't want to be anywhere near the synthetics like this. It almost repulsed you, just there was something instinctual about it to me that I felt no, that's not going to be what I want to be about. And the animal products, of course, naturally, this is a new era. We don't need to be using animal products in our perfumes. So I only did the natural components. So I didn't complete my coursework. So I was a bad student, I suppose. So, that knowledge, I took what I needed from that. And it really helped later. I actually came across an old, it was in English, but it was from a perfumery workbook from 1961. And it was about building accords. And they used in 61 about 50-50 synthetics and naturals and the blending. But that really helped based on the small course that I'd taken before. And then going through this workbook on my own, it helped with the knowledge. And I did trial and error building accords, but eliminating the synthetics and just using the naturals, but following their guide. Mm-hmm. That really helped me a lot. I really liked, so that was on my own. And then a few other things I did after that too.
Yeah. I feel like it was something that was always, no pun intended, brewing in the back of your mind.
Yeah. Yes, it was. It was always sort of there. It was sitting there, waiting for the right moment.
So it's sitting there waiting. It's very patiently waiting for you to be ready to take this leap. So what was the defining moment that made you do it?
Well, so when I was working for that airline, I was living back east in Canada, and I was able to travel quite freely. I was very lucky. I went to San Francisco and took a course with a renowned herbologist, and it was a course on distillation. And in that class, there was people who were thinking of doing venturing into the same business as myself. And I was smelling some of things they had brought, and also which the lady who I took the course from, her name was Jean Rose, she had concoctions in her classroom attic. And I felt, you know what, I can actually do this. I feel confident in what I've been doing on the side, as a hobby. I can bring this to fruition now and pull everything that I do know together and make it actually work. So that was the thought that twigged it, but I wasn't back in BC yet. But it was the knowledge that I'm going to be able to do this. So, yeah.
The last piece of the puzzle. That's all you needed is Mrs. Rose's class, and you ended up starting out with 4 scents, right?
Yeah. So when I did decide to actually open, I developed a business plan, and then I need perfume. So there was a couple of
need products.
Yeah, that would be good. I need products on the shelf. Oh no, panic. So I already had prototypes. So I just fine-tuned my prototypes and developed them, and they were all based on smaller recipes, which I had to expand out for volume purposes. And initially it was a little bit trial and error, and just in working out the whole processes, my son just trying to educate and find as much information as I could about that, and then developing my own way of doing things then as far as the filtering and bottling, how can I make this work? And
the experience itself is pretty unique. So you had mentioned to me that you have a little bit more of a workshop concept for your store, right? Can you tell us a little bit about that? Yeah,
it's not because we are transparent as far as our ingredients. I'm not hiding big barrels of pre-made perfume that I'm bringing in from overseas and pouring into bottles. I put all the ingredients open, so people come into the perfumery, they can smell the different perfumes. We have 12 now, but they can also see the working area. So all the ingredients are there, and they can see the bottles that are aging. Sometimes I'm actually filtering, and I'll stop what I'm doing to talk to people. And so, I like that idea. People like it as well. They like to see the actual workings. So, yeah,
I love that. I love that too, because it gives you a sense of connection to the scents as well. It's not just that you go pick up a bottle, but you get to see you in action, and the blood, sweat, and tears that go behind the scents, and making sure that they're perfect for everyone. Yeah, it's such a fun experience. And you had mentioned that you're very transparent about your ingredients. Is there any specific reason why you feel that way?
I think there's a lot of misinformation out there for a consumer, and even myself wanting to say wear a natural perfume. When you really start digging into it, it was hard to find out what the actual ingredients are. Yeah. Because labeling can be misleading, and it can represent a whole range of ingredients. So I just wanted to make sure that if somebody wanted that knowledge, they were able to find it. So I list on a page on the website, the ingredients all the ingredients that I use, not specifically say for one perfume. I don't have here's my recipe, because that's proprietary, but I have everything that I use listed in one spot.
Yeah. So there's no greenwashing going on.
No. Like I said, no, I choose not to use isolates, even though some natural perfumers do, and that's fine. Yeah. It's, I think, a little bit tougher using complete naturals. You really have to work at finding a bright top note and maybe weaving a floral middle note, but keeping it in balance with the base note. It's harder work.
It's like music. Yeah. It sounds like it's very there's such a flow to what you're doing.
Yeah, it is a little bit like music. It's funny because, and maybe original perfumers, they thought of that as well. That's why they have words that go
similar.
Are similar. Mm-hmm. Notes and chords.
Notes and chords. Mm-hmm. I can see that. Yeah. And your ingredients and where you're from is actually used to be a native tribe that lived there, correct?
Yes, well, I should have started off by saying I acknowledge that we are on unceded territory of the Cowichan people. So yes, in British Columbia, well, all of Canada, actually, and North America, First Nation peoples were here before the lands were colonized. And we live together, we share the land. So there has to be a respect for the land. So in regards to, say, wild foraging, there should be a respect for what you're taking, and you should never over harvest. I do it very selectively. Some things I actually grow, or I know people with property that might have acreages and it's just wild, and they'll say you're free to come and pick things, or there might be when I collect lichen, for instance, is an ingredient, or oak moss. Mm-hmm. It's generally from fallen branches, and so there is a respect. There should be a respect for nature, and ties into respecting the First Nations people who lived here too.
I agree with you. Yeah, the planet has enough for our appetite as long as we don't overdo our appetites, right? So
yeah, absolutely. But I use ingredients when I'm able to, things that are farmed and are sustainable. For instance, I do use Australian sandalwood because it is sustainable, and it's captures a lot of carbon that wouldn't normally have been captured, and it's not. And whereas, say, Indian sandalwood that's not farmed, it's in some cases it could be devastating, like the forest in a certain area, and we don't want to be part of that. So,
okay,
and we don't need to be.
There's so many layers to a perfume, and like you had mentioned in the beginning, synthetic, natural. You guys are more like natural, simple, luxurious, but there's lots of perfumes out there that I guess are not. So for the listeners out there, what are some things that they should look out for in a perfume to avoid?
Well, if a perfume doesn't say they're natural, then they're not natural. It's full of synthetics. And the industry originally would have been completely natural, of course. And it wasn't until around the turn of the 1900s where synthetics were slowly being introduced. And it just increased. Why? Because of business. Because in part business, it's so much cheaper to use a synthetic versus a completely natural product. Think of rose, for instance, and the cost of what rose oil is versus a synthetic rose. But there's absolutely no comparison between a real rose oil, for instance, and a synthetic. But apart from that, I believe there's certain notes that cannot be achieved naturally that are achieved with synthetics. Mm-hmm. And so that's fair enough. If somebody likes a perfume that smells like cotton candy and licorice. Not licorice. That was a bad example because we could do that naturally. But something that's syrupy, sweet, and has a tang of that sharp marine notes that sometimes you get in the synthetic. It's you can't really do that with a natural. But I don't want to, and that's not what I do. So it's giving people a choice.
Yeah, definitely. And either you're going to smell like cotton candy or Douglas fir, right? I think those are two different types of people.
Yeah. I'll be the Douglas fir one. Yeah.
And you talked a lot about your ingredients, saying I am a very responsible forager. I grow. I make sure that we don't overdo it on the land, respecting also the indigenous people. But when you pick your ingredients, can you tell me a little bit about the types of ingredients? Like you mentioned to me a lot about cedar, Douglas fir. There's one that had like a rainforest scent. So you can tell the listeners a little bit about the ingredients and why you picked them.
Sure. There's one ingredient that's indigenous to many places in North America. Cottonwood trees, and I'm not sure if you know what a cottonwood tree is. It grows in wet areas. And
not too many trees in Orange County.
Sorry. Yeah, no cottonwoods down there for sure. It's a bit drier. But for instance, I use that because the scent is It's in the air. It's a scent of spring, because when the buds start getting plump and resinous before the leaves come out, the wind just carries this scent around, and it's just absolutely amazing. But it becomes more of like a scent of place. So it's so familiar. It's beautiful, but familiar too. So I like to use some of these ingredients because people really, if they have a good nose, they can pick up on some of these ingredients and go, oh, like it reminds them of home or one of their favorite locations, wherever it may be. And so now I'm forgetting your question, but yeah, like cottonwood buds, for instance. Yeah. So it's, that's one ingredient I use, and you would never find that. And it's hard to reproduce. You couldn't reproduce that synthetically, or they're not. I guess they could if they really wanted to try, but it's a smell of like fresh laundry almost. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful, clean scent. It's very pretty. And I use Douglas fir, like the spring tips, for instance. I talked about that. They're very almost citrusy rather than woodsy, and fresh and green. And cedar leaf, or Western red cedar, has a distinct smell that everybody's familiar with. So when you get off the plane, for instance, on the west coast of Canada, or maybe like anywhere on the Pacific Northwest, there's a smell in the air that hits you. It's a salt water, but it's this really pungent smell of cedar that lingers in the air, and it's just naturally here. And but you have to be consciously thinking about it to pick up on it. But it was always very noticeable to me every time I came back home. So cedar, it's like a bit of this like smell of home to me.
You have to have a specific nose to do what you do. You probably can smell things from a mile away, it sounds like.
Well, I think you develop it. It's like wine, like maybe, when you're younger, you drink maybe cheaper wines, and then somebody introduces you to something a little bit more aged and a little bit better quality. Mm-hmm. And then once you sample something, like a luxury once sampled it becomes something that you need in your life. You can't ever go back. Right? So it's educating your nose the same way you can educate your palate, I guess is what I'm saying. So
I didn't know that you could do that. I'll have to keep that in mind.
Yeah. You will. You probably are doing it without thinking, but if you're consciously, as you go about day-to-day life, like smelling things, and then you would be more attuned to it. If it's just like tuning into that part of life.
Yeah, and I think that the one thing that I really love about your scents and what we've talked about is not just the educational part of, where it's coming from and the respect that you pay to how you actually obtain, your ingredients, but you're creating memories in a bottle. I thought that was so fun and interesting. You talk about getting off the plane and the salt water and the cedar and the sweetness and the fresh linen. You told me that your ingredients and your fragrances are all memories. So can you tell the listeners a little bit more about how you're creating those?
Well, it's like you need a direction. So if you're going to sit down, and I think we talked about this before, if say you're going to paint a picture, you need to know as you sit down what I'm going to do, like that bowl of apples or that tree. So you need a direction. So what I blend from is memory. So I'll think about a happy memory in a certain location, and then deep dive into that and say, what was the specifics of that memory, and try to pull back and remember the certain elements. I quite often talk about Tofino, because as a child, my family would take day trips to Tofino. A lot of people know Tofino on the west coast of Vancouver Island. So we would drive over, and as kids, you just couldn't wait to get to the beach. And it was that anticipation of getting to the beach. So as we burst out of the car, we're all carrying blankets and picnic baskets, but it's running through the path that led down to Long Beach that we would go to. But everything was very damp and moist because it's a rainforest. And the path was lined with like cedar and wild roses and early summer. And there's lots of moss and the earth. The salt air was in the background, but it was the smell of the path that really brings Tofino memories back to me. And like Sunshine Coast is another one. That's an area on the west coast here as well. But I have a clear memory And it's my memory, not somebody else's memory. But if people sort of can take sense and they can make it the memories their own too. But I remember being a child eating an orange creamsicle sitting on a log under on a hot summer day under a Douglas fir, and the fir cones from the Douglas fir get hot and crispy, and the scent's always in the air. And it was just the smell of the warm driftwood, Douglas fir, the tangy orange vanilla creamsicle. It was like everything. That was my memory. So that was a good direction to blend a perfume. Like I could pull all these elements together and make a perfume based on that memory. That was a long-winded story. Sorry.
No, I love it. I think that the story behind the fragrance almost makes it smell even better. I don't know how to explain it. It just sounds like when you're explaining running to the car or the warm summer day, like it's like you have a blanket or you get a brush of or a breath of fresh air, whatever it might be. It's just so unique to me to like hear from the artist's mouth, like what the inspiration is. And I love that you're creating memories and bottling them, and then people could take them with them and do whatever it is that, feels right to them based on how their senses are picking up on it. And we talked a little bit about sustainability and, the way that you're developing, but you had mentioned to me a couple of things with sustainability, transparency in a group that you're a part of. So do you want to explain to our listeners what it is that you're doing on the back end just to make sure that you're doing your part to maintain your own standards?
Well, I belong to an international the International Perfume Foundation, which is a group of natural perfumers. And as a member, you have to adhere to a code of ethics, the new luxury code of ethics, and it's on their website. But it's mostly about respecting the earth, respecting like people, and being true, like being transparent, and all of those things. So that's very important to have a guide to go by, and also it's a commitment as well. So I'm committing to them that yes, I will continue to adhere to this code of ethics, but I'm also giving that commitment to the consumer. And so, what was your question?
Oh, yeah. We were just talking about the sustainability. So I know that your actual packaging is sustainable as well.
Mm-hmm. I choose to use, and some people might look down their nose on this, like some diehards, but that's okay. I choose to use screw top bottles. And the other choice would have been the crimp top bottles, which is, so there are a wider range of beautiful bottles you can get by using crimp top bottles. But if I use a screw top, people can repurpose the bottle, and it can also, the bottle itself can be recycled, which is great. And so people, I know my customers will do both. So they might want to make their own home spray or do a mix of water and essential oils.
Whatever's
or something.
Left over at the bottom.
Like something, right? Like, so, or they just might recycle it. So that gives them a choice, versus just throwing a bottle away. So.
Right. Yeah. And you have a donation program too, right? For the Ancient
Forest Alliance. Ancient Forest Alliance. Yeah. They're in the West Coast here because I felt it was a perfect fit because I am taking a little bit from the forest, not a lot, very limited, but it ties in with the perfume because I feel that the Ancient Forest Alliance protects ancient trees, the ancient trees of the rainforest here on the island. Yeah. So they're still allowed there's only 3% remaining, and they're still allowed to be logged, which I think is a crime.
It is a crime.
These trees are over 1,000 years old, some of them. They will never be replaced. We will never, ever see them come back again, ever, because climate is changing. So it's so sad, and it's devastating the environment, and it's something we shouldn't be doing. So their mandate is to try to protect them. They actually find these trees, and they do everything they can. Like with lobbying governments and shining a light on certain groves that they might find of these trees before the logging companies find them. So, anyways, they do good work. So I think it's very, very important.
That is really important. It's not just maintaining, I guess it would be a species of tree. I don't know. Is it called a species or?
Yeah, there's different ones. So it could be like the red cedars. It could be the Sitka spruce trees. It could be Douglas fir trees as well. If some people, your listeners, Google Big Lonely Doug, they'll come across an old Douglas fir, and he's standing alone in a field of clear cut. And for some reason, he was left, the one tree left. And so he's called Big Lonely Doug. And it's on the south end of Vancouver Island. And people drive to see him, and it's heartbreaking. It really is. So yeah, Big Lonely Doug.
I think the heartbreaking part of it too is, a tree gives so much life. It's not just, providing paper or whatever it is. Those trees are a home. They are an ecosystem. There's a reason that they've been there for 1,000 years. Maintaining life.
Absolutely. Some of the trees are mother trees. They're bringing nutrients down into the ground, and younger trees are coming up within their root system. But they're very, it's so important to keep them. Like all the other species, the animal species, it's all integrated. So once we devastate that environment, we're not getting any of that back. So there's a bigger picture there.
Yeah. That is so true. Yeah. And, just being so respectful of, how you're handling your products and, just all the way down to the packaging. I have to just applaud you, because I love the product that you create. I love the story behind it, because you waited 30 years to make this bad boy. So finally you have arrived into the perfumer that you were meant to be, and you're creating these really fun memories for everyone else to enjoy. So I love the whole story and everything that you're doing. But you mentioned you had 12 perfumes now, or do you have any that you can share about in the making, or anything you're excited about?
I am actually. Yes, I've got one coming out for when I reopen to the public. So we closed for a couple of months, and then reopen for March. And this one is not so much on the coastline. It's going to be named after a town in the Rocky Mountains. So it's going to be Jasper. And one of the main ingredients is going to be the tamarack tree, which grows along through the mountains and a lot of northern cooler climates in Canada. It has a beautiful, beautiful essential oil that's distilled from the wood, and the tamaracks are prolific. They're everywhere, so there's no shortage of tamarack trees. So there is a young company in Alberta that's actually distilling the tamarack trees, and I'm going to be using that as a main ingredient. But so Jasper's the memories, I won't go into my story of my original memory of going to Jasper, but I do have a sincere memory of that. But
feel free to if you want. I would love to hear it.
Well, I'll give you the story of the scent. So if you could imagine, if you were walking through an alpine meadow and then coming into an old cedar log cabin. So it's the smells that are within the wall, like the cedar, the smokiness from the fire, a leathery scent, even though it would have to be the vegan leather. So there's floral notes running through the middle, but it's very warm and a cozy, comforting scent. I do use a lot of oud, little touch of vanilla, some different ingredients like the tamarack. I do have sandalwood in there as well, because it's such a lovely creaminess, and I do use some tonka as well to give it some smoothness. But it is a beautiful scent. I'm super excited about it. I haven't bottled it yet. It's still just finishing aging, but I keep testing it and getting more excited about it. Yeah, I know. It's smelling. I know. Actually, I have it on right now. Yeah. Almost ready.
Well, that's so cool. I'm so excited to see what happens with the relaunch in March. And I'm thankful that you were able to fight the good fight during COVID. I know that it was challenging for a lot of companies. But for everyone out there, where can they find you for this relaunch? Instagram, websites, in store?
All over. So Instagram, it's at Wild Coast Perfumery and wildcoastperfumes.com. Instagram, and the new one will be up on there. And that's my website right now. We're going to be doing a little bit of a rebrand coming up this year. I'm excited about as well. I actually hired my daughter as a bit of a creative director, so she thinks she's going to bring me into the new century a little bit. So anyways, but I think it's just fine how it is. But we're going to tweak it a bit. So yeah, that's where you can find me. And I'm on Facebook as well at Wild Coast Perfumery.
And I will put everything in the show notes so you guys don't have to hurry and write that down. So you can find everything that you need there. And thank you so much for joining me today. It was such a pleasure having you.
Oh, no, thank you, Samantha. I really appreciate what you're doing. And it was my pleasure to be here. So we'll talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you all for joining us on another episode of Conscious Basket. And just a small reminder, Conscious Basket is not just hosting interviews. We are in the process of launching our marketplace, where our goal is to make it super easy for you to make conscious decisions about what you're buying by knowing the origin of the products and services. We're using our technology to highlight a transparent supply chain with our vendors, which means you know what goes into those products and where they came from to make sure those things you buy don't weigh on your conscience. And to ensure this peace of mind, we have developed a score to rank the sustainability of the purchase. For instance, how much water is being used, trees saved, animal lives, human rights, and so on. So, if you're an entrepreneur with a sustainable product and would be interested in being on the platform, please email us at info@consciousbasket.com. Also, if you're an entrepreneur, thought leader, or academic that would like to be a guest on the show, please drop us a line at the same email. And if you're just interested in taking a closer look at us, you can also take a look at our website, which is www.consciousbasket.com. And as always, you can explore the topics we discussed in the show notes and find many more topics on all of our social platforms. So give us a follow on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn @ConsciousBasket. If you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to our show and leave us a comment with any key takeaways. I read them all. Share with your friends, family, post a screenshot on your social about the podcast so that we can extend our reach to help propel our movement forward. Finally, just another small reminder that perfectionism is not the goal here. In my opinion, perfectionism is what gets in the way of all of us collectively picking what I like to call your thing, which is whatever you choose to make a positive impact on this world. Thank you again for joining us.